Are we on, Scott? Okay. Good evening. My name is Medina, and I'm one of the public affairs specialists here at the VA in West LA. Thank you for joining us for this evening's Master Plan Town Hall for the period of 2022 to 2027. We'll begin with the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag and the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Tonight, we'll begin with opening remarks by our Medical Center Director, Dr. Braverman. Following that, Mr. McHenrick, the Deputy Director, will provide us with a progress update. Next, the Johnson and Fain team will provide us with an insight into the updated site analysis. That team consists of Kersu Duvall and John Jackson. Following their presentation, we'll hear from the Principal Developer team. That team consists of Oscar Alvarado, Steve Peck, Tyler Monroe, and Brian DeAndrea. Next, we'll move into next steps and discussions with Mr. McHenrick. Following the presentations, we'll open the floor to questions and answers. Thank you for joining us.
Okay, greetings everybody. Thanks for joining us this afternoon. So I'm Dr. Steve Braverman. I'm the director of the VA Greater Los Angeles Healthcare System. And I'm going to be consistent in my usual practice and not miss an opportunity to talk about COVID and vaccination up front. We are still continue to be in the midst of this surge, although here in Los Angeles, we're doing much better than in other parts of the country. We peaked in our hospitalizations for COVID patients last week at about 16 here at GLA. We're down to single digits now, which is a good news story. Hopefully it'll stay that way for a little while. We'll see what happens after Labor Day weekend and all of the football games and other sorts of things where people are mingling together again. But hopefully, we're in a better position than Texas and Florida and Kentucky and other locations in the southern part of the country who don't have a high population of vaccinated personnel. Here, we continue to offer a third shot for any veteran who has immunodeficiency and would benefit from a third shot. We are poised to be able to start doing booster vaccinations. Once the FDA approves that, we anticipate sometime after the 20th of September, since we primarily use the Pfizer vaccine here. So that means that anybody who is within a certain period of time after their second shot would be eligible for a booster shot. So that's going to be in process, and we'll be in good shape to be able to do that. Earlier today, some of you may know that the president issued an executive order for all executive branch federal employees to be required to have vaccination or to have a medical or religious exemption. That was already a requirement for our VHA staff. So we have a requirement to have that complete by the 8th of October and well in line to be able to establish that. So vaccinate, vaccinate, vaccinate. That's the best way to get back to normal as we continue to deal with this Delta variant. Who knows what will happen with the Mu variant or any of the other new variants that might come along, as long as we continue to have pockets of lots of people infected in a particular place. All right, enough on that. Today's goal is to have the second of 4 sessions to talk about the master plan, to provide changes and progress that's been made since each of the prior engagements. This one would be since the first engagement. A focus today is also on addressing amenities in the area and the use of open spaces and opportunities. So think about all the parts of the master plan that would not specifically engage, the housing itself. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Mr. McHenrick to get everybody started. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Braverman. Welcome, everyone. This is our second town hall on the Draft Master Plan 2022-2027 development and concepts forward. Next slide, please. Just want to go back through the agenda here, talk about that for just a second. We'll do a quick background and overview of the master plan project we're working on here, recap of our town hall kickoff for those that didn't see it, and you can go see that either under our site where we have under West LA, the website where we have public meetings, or you can go into the draft master plan area and see some material there in the slides. So we'll talk about that later. We have some specific things we want to try and encourage folks to give us feedback on, and that's part of our process here is gathering feedback as we go, so we can incorporate that into the working document, the draft of the master plan 2022-2027 that we're going to get out to you all the first part of October. We want to talk about progress to date, completed engagements and collaborations we've had, the summary of the master plan workshop we've completed. Then we want to share some information about site analysis and opportunities and constraints. Some of the feedback we see talks about things that are difficult to do given the constraints of the environment, what we can do on the campus, what we can't, given road and building layouts and things like that. Can't move entire things. But we can do some things, so we want to spend a little bit of time sharing that so folks are better informed about input that they're providing and so that they better understand some of the options and things that we'll lay out in that working draft of the master plan for comment. And then talking about the community plan overview and engagements again, wanting to share information about our engagements we've done along the way and how we're working together here, as well as the next steps there. I'll come back at the end and do a conclusion. Okay, next slide. This is background. This was in our prior slide deck as well. Those folks that are just joining us for the first time, getting familiar with some of those things in the draft master plan, the commitment for, the 1,200 units that was envisioned. VA is committed to that, and this update process that happens every 3 to 5 years for the draft master plan, and the West LA Leasing Act there that really leaned us into commitment and more specific land use requirements. And the bodies that we work with, the OIG, the Office of the Inspector General, who does audits to track our progress and provide feedback. And then our Veterans Community Oversight and Engagement Board, our VCOEB, working with them monthly touch points as well as their quarterly public meetings. Next slide. Just a quick recap of the town hall we had. So that was our first one on August 19th. Some of the things we talked about in a little more detail. The Homeless Veterans Service Plan, where SERS, after the draft master plan in 2016 came out, SERS had about $150 million a year budget and 450 employees that were engaged in providing services across a large spectrum across all of the greater Los Angeles healthcare system jurisdiction, from San Luis Obispo to Bakersfield to East LA, down here to West LA. So a lot of area to cover. We talked about land use reforms. We have a land use committee here. We review applications. We ensure that the land uses that we're approving in this process are veteran centric. We talked about environmental historic due diligence, some of the things we did in that area, the PEIS, the programmatic environmental study, the NEPA, or other National Environmental Act compliance documents, working with SHPO, the State Historical Preservation Office, and signing an agreement with them. And then infrastructure. We talked about the assessments we've done, the 8 primary utilities that we've gone through, the dry utilities, the wet utilities, and how we would need to upgrade them on the North Campus. Metro is transportation. We talked about that. And then touched on the West LA Improvement Act and what that means to us and our ability to use some more of the funds to support homeless housing on the campus. We discussed current plans and the vision for redevelopment as it's laid out in these 4 zones, slightly different from the draft master plan's 5 zones. So we wanted to make sure veterans who were viewing the material and making comments understood that where we're shifting these, and this has a little bit of data, but you can see more in the prior town hall information. And then we walk through how to provide feedback, and I'll do that again today towards the end of this meeting. Next slide. So really today, I want to call this out as something different and specific that we want. Draft master plan took about 1,000 public comments over the Federal Registry area and through some of the town halls and engagements. They started with a clean slate and they really had to develop the concepts. Whereas we've had 5 years of development process, land use discussions and approvals from historical points of view. And we've got the draft community plan. So looking at that and the current draft master plan website, we're using a similar process of getting feedback, and we will talk again about the Federal Registry and how we're going to use it in this process. But we've also, because we've already got material in place and we're doing things on the ground with buildings under construction now, we want to share information and get feedback along the way, as well as share our working draft of the master plan for the next 5 years with a vision out to 10 years. But we'll do that through the Federal Registry, but we also want to gather information along the way, and we'll talk about that on that website. So here we want to talk about specifically these 16 amenities, where we want folks to think about these areas and things that they either see in the documentation that we've posted, and we'll show you how to provide feedback, as well as access some of the key documents and provide information, as well as some of the things that will be shared today will be hung out there. So you can go to the site and pull down some of the maps and look at them. But you can see these 16 areas that we're looking for input on. Okay, next slide. Just want to touch on the master plan process here. It's 5 tasks or 5 phases. Phase 1, we could strike that as we've already done that process. You can see the check marks there. We're highly engaged with the Chief of Staff of VA. She is our chief executive for this effort, as well as for draft master plan overall, and our integrated project team, which brings together all the different VA offices that are really working on this. Not only us, but our higher headquarters, our VISN, our Veteran Integrated Service Network, as well as VHA leadership. We have folks from the Office of Construction and Facility Management, as Office of Asset Enterprise Management, all working to get these projects underway and to redo the utilities on the North Campus. So that integrated project team is key. We're doing those other things, stakeholder engagement and evaluate feedback. And you can see that happening along the way. That's important to us, that we get feedback on information we already have. I don't want to miss that opportunity to inform what we're going to have in our working draft of the master plan that's presented early October. And you can see down there in that bottom portion, we're shooting to get the refined preferred concept. That's really what we're looking at, to try and get that document out, which would be our working draft of the master plan version. So hoping to really start refining it and getting it through the grinder by mid to late September, and then out early October in the first couple of weeks. And then, of course, getting the final document to the Secretary's office early December is our goal. Next slide. So just talking about some of the engagements we've had, the kickoff town hall, gave information about the website where the questionnaire is, engaged with the Chief of Staff and the ITP Governance Board on where we're at. We've had a workshop with some subject matter expert consultants, principal developer team, master planning project team, our different offices here at VA, and really got some insights that helped inform what we're sharing today, as well as solidifying some of the key ways forward. And there's several other discussions that were needed to be continued to get some more clarity on options. And then, of course, we're going to continue to talk about opportunities to engage over the next 2 months. Next slide. So you see the documents here, the record of decision that came out late 2019, I think in September. And then the campus historic research plan in 2021, and then the draft community plan with the principal developer. Those are key documents that are available in the master plan area, some under the library, some under this activity. But we certainly have links to those so you can find those and review those. Those are important. We have our draft South Campus master plan concepts. Of course, those are pre-bid for those projects, so we don't share those publicly at this point, but you can see the diagram there. And we've talked in our general town halls about VA's recommitment to the healthcare in the South Campus, which is an important part of the draft master plan concept and the West LA Leasing Act. We do have some healthcare recommitment on the North Campus as well. Building 212 and our domiciliary effort and things. We want to ensure that those are enduring, but we're still working with VA higher headquarters on the concepts for the new critical care center, our new hospital, consolidated research center, power utility plant, parking lots on the South Campus to start to go vertical a little bit as we give up some of the horizontal land space to a lot of construction. Also incorporates the mass transit evolution of the metro, bringing that to campus. That's the metro plan. And then we've done that site utility that I've talked about previously. We're still working through that. And we're doing some of that work with the trunk line effort on the North Campus for 3 dry utilities. That's been ongoing for 9 months and will conclude near the end of this year. Talking about some of these agenda items for our workshop, we really talked about community development and integration with the community. How do we develop a community that's integrated with the Brentwood nearby community? Veterans will want to be part of that community or minimum have access to it. Access and circulation around the campus. It has a unique design to it. And our partners with Johnson Fain will talk about that. Open space, wanted to talk about how we use that. Looking at other space that we might be able to reclaim if we do some unique engineering concepts of access roads and other walking paths and things. And then the facilities in the town center concept of what that would be. That's a concept that was brought up in the draft master plan that the principal developers picked up on and carried forward. Next slide. Okay, these are 3 great slides that helped inform me, or images. The draft master plan had that image and saw the open space and saw the buildings and started to divvy up concepts of what could and couldn't be used possibly. Draft master or draft community plan and the South Campus. You could say that South Campus is a master plan, but what we really have is a master plan for the entire campus. And we need to incorporate some of the concepts, even though they aren't refined at this time by VA senior leadership. They don't have quite refinement on execution for those, although several of those projects are in different planning phases. But you can see the 21 draft community plan is really focused on the North Campus. And then the image to the right is a good just shot of what it looks like in real time with an aerial view of the campus. Okay, next slide. I'm going to turn that over to Johnson Fain if they're prepared and ready to go. Okay.
Yes. Hello. My name is Kersu Dalal. I am part of the master planning team, Johnson Fain, and we were actually involved with the 2016 draft master plan effort. So it's good to be back working on this 5 years later. As Mr. McHenrick mentioned, there's been a lot of work that's happened in the 5 years that we've been away from this process. And so we spent the better part of last month kind of just going through the various documents that have been prepared, like the PEIS, the Historic Resources Plan, and taking that information to revisit our site analysis for the entire 388 acres. So I'll take you through the next few slides, and then John Jackson from my office will also be commenting on some of the analysis we've done. On each of these slides, you'll see a little blue box, and that's really where we want the stakeholders to provide feedback. So the first thing we looked at is the historical background of the site, and that's something we'd done back in 2016, but um, now having the information that was a part of the campus historic resources plan that Mr. McHenrick mentioned just finished earlier this year, we have some additional information on the historical assets of the site. There are two buildings that are circled in red dashed lines that are on the National Register of Historic Places. And in fact, the entire North Campus and parts of the South Campus are also recognized as a historic district. Besides that, there's buildings of certain significance that we had learned about in our 2016 effort, and we will be looking and revisiting those, taking into consideration the studies that have been done to specifically look at some of these historical aspects. A couple of things I just wanted to mention on this slide. The blue dashed lines represent some unique configurations of roads and buildings, which the Historic Resources Plan has identified as areas that should be preserved and enhanced. And so we are looking at opportunities as to how that can be done. In our efforts, we are obviously working with the principal developers in the community plan to come up with some of these ideas. But just to reiterate, we've been involved in this process for the last month. And so a lot of what we are doing right now is our initial analysis. And what we'd like from the stakeholders is feedback on some specific questions. So for example, on the historical aspect, what we'd like to see in terms of feedback is, how do you see some of these historical buildings being reused? That's a question that we have. And all these questions will be on the master plan website as well. So you can use that as a vehicle to provide us with feedback, because the feedback we get from the stakeholders will then inform our planning process. Next slide, please. So we talked about the historical analysis. Open space is a big consideration on the site. It's 388 acres. It's one of the few areas in West LA where you still kind of sense the natural topography of the land. So the dark green areas kind of represent some of the natural arroyos that actually continue all the way up to the Getty Center and are potential areas for ecological habitats. That's one of the opportunities we've identified. There's a lot of maintained open spaces also on the campus. Some of them have historic significance. The historic trees on the site definitely lend to the character of this place. And so that's something that we are cognizant of and trying to build upon as we get into the plan making. But in terms of stakeholder feedback, again, the two questions we have are, what new types of open spaces would you like to see on the campus? So whether it's communal gardens, plazas, certain kinds of parks, and then also what kind of activities do you foresee happening in those spaces? So those are the two questions we'd really like to get your feedback on. Next slide, please. This is more of just informing the stakeholders that there are certain constraints, and specifically environmental constraints. For example, the darker pink color shows areas that are susceptible to landslide. I mean, we are in Southern California, so that's something to consider. The dashed lighter pink area on the northwest of the campus is the historical waste disposal area, which is off limits in some ways. And so that's definitely a hard constraint that we have to deal with when we get into the planning effort. On the east side of the campus, the PEIS had identified like areas where liquefaction is a likely threat. And so that's something that we are going to be aware of as we get into the planning effort. And then the darker purple area represents areas where there might be significant mitigation measures and cleanup required. So that kind of summarizes some of the environmental constraints. Now, John Jackson will take you through the next 4 slides.
Thanks, Hirsu. Next slide, please. So as Carson mentioned, I'm John Jackson. I worked quite intimately on the 2016 plan. So if you guys were involved in that process, it's likely that we met at some point. So I'm going to take you through a few slides here. This first one being site context. And this is really about the general campus location, the physical setting. On the diagram, you'll see colors surrounding the site, and those represent the land uses, the orange and yellow being residential, mostly higher density residential on the west side, and then a few pockets of commercial, notably to the north, the Brentwood Village area, and then, back to the site context, please. Thank you. And then along Wilshire and then San Vicente Boulevard. So the opportunities here are really about increasing accessibility from the campus for vets into these commercial centers, really getting that public vet integration going. The threat, of course, being that this is a very high income area, so that reintegration might be a bit constrained. The red lines represent barriers, the 405 being a major one, dividing the campus from Westwood, while at the same time actually providing regional connectivity from the freeway and views from the freeway to the campus, mostly in the service area located south of the Columbarium and north of Wilshire. Wilshire itself is a significant barrier dividing the campus north and south. And then as Kursu mentioned and represented in the green are the natural topography areas. And these are unique and an asset in that throughout much of LA in this area, they've been graded out of existence. So they're unique in the site as well as providing security benefits and helping with the general tranquility of the site. So while we're very familiar with the site and its context, we don't live there or work there. So the feedback question is related to that. What other opportunities and constraints related to the general campus context do you think should be considered? Next slide, please. So secondly, I'm looking at the access and circulation. So driving, transit, walking, biking, all around campus. So how everyone moves about the campus. And since the 2016 master plan, the subway south of Wilshire has started construction. And with that, when it opens, will bring connectivity to the greater LA region, but also the potential and likelihood of this, since it's the terminus of the subway, being a place where the local community might come and take advantage of on-site parking to use the subway. We understand that Metro has committed to both monitoring and mitigation of these issues, so ensuring that takes place is necessary to maintain the accessibility of the campus, particularly in the south. The road network is really the major circulator of the campus. Our traffic engineer identified this, and it's quite clear on the map that the east-west road network is quite strong. However, north-south is very constrained, with Bonsall really being the spine of the north-south circulation. The opportunity here is a additional emergency road that builds off of the road that's behind the CalVets facility to provide a second linkage on the west side of the campus in the north-south direction. Additionally, because of the park-like setting and mild climate of the campus, increasing biking and hiking and walking is also a huge consideration. And we also want to note that that the access points will be limited. So we don't want cut-through traffic. We know that's been a problem in the past. So limiting access at those points to refrain from to limit the neighbors from going through the campus is a huge concern that we're aware of. So our stakeholder feedback are these two questions. What do you think are the most important issues in improving how people get around campus? And how could that north-south circulation be improved for pedestrians, cars, and transit users? Next slide, please. So this map is a composite of land use agreements. And since the 2016 master plan, leases and agreements have been canceled and renegotiated and newly initiated. So while this map is quite complex, it's in fact very hard to read. The details of each of these agreements can be found at the link, the West LA Draft Master Plan website shown on this slide. EUL's enhanced use leases are really the mechanism for the permanent supportive housing that's getting built on site today. And the 2016 master plan led to legislation, the West LA Leasing Act, that's really aimed at the amenities for vets, veteran-centric amenities. So the stakeholder feedback, and this was mentioned earlier, is about that. What new services, amenities would you like to see on campus? Next slide, please. And finally, this is a synopsis diagram. It takes a lot of what Kursu and I have spoken about and puts it in one place. And it's busy on purpose because it is quite a complex site. What we want to highlight additionally are the red shaded areas, which we've called key redevelopment areas. In particular, there are two which relate to the stakeholder feedback questions. One being the town center, which is number 4, located in the center of the site. And then the second being number 5, which we've called the utility service and opportunity area. So the town center as the hub and the amenity center of the entire campus is related to question number 1, which is what are the uses specifically in the town center that should be located there, and who do you expect will be using them? And then for the utility service and opportunity area, in 2016 we had identified that as a place to be redeveloped for job training. And since then, in talking to stakeholders, we've grown to understand that that area, particularly in the near term, is necessary for back of house storage, engineering services. So it may be that job training, it could be located there, but we need to consider other locations as well. And that relates to our second question here, which is how do you see job training being conducted on campus, and how should it be integrated into the plan? Thank you. Can we go to the next slide, please?
Okay, we'll take it from here. Good afternoon, and thank you for having us. My name is Oscar Alvarado. I'm Vice President of Housing Development here with Century Housing. We are one of the 3 members of the Principal Developer team. I'm joined this afternoon by Tyler Monroe with Tom Saffron and Associates and Steve Peck with US Vets. Next slide, please. The West LA Veterans Collective is a partnership comprised of 3 LA-based organizations. Together, the team has decades of experience serving their veterans in Los Angeles County and beyond. 2 of our 3 organizations are led by veterans and were founded by the late Judge Harry Pregerson. Our third partner, TSA, is based in Brentwood, just a few blocks away from the West LA VA campus. The partnership we formed is a very natural one. Our 3 organizations have a long history of working together at places like the Villages at Cabrillo in Long Beach. Next slide. Our mission is one of promoting recovery, wellness, and a more hopeful future for veterans. We'll do this by creating a thriving, supportive community. Next slide. We initiated our community planning efforts by committing to a set of guiding principles. For instance, this will be a holistic community. It's more than simply housing. It's about wellness, connections, opportunity, and pride. We acknowledge that the voice of our veterans is of fundamental significance, and we exercise modesty in new construction while uplifting the historic character of the community. Next slide. The campus is a sprawling piece of property. It's historic and it's beautiful and serves a very important purpose. To do justice to this special setting, we developed a set of urban design strategies to guide our planning and development activities. These include things like creating a sense of hierarchy and order, concentrating and clustering our developments to foster social interactions, and fostering connections to distinct areas, resources, and amenities. Next slide. So our community plan contemplates both adaptive reuse of existing historic buildings and new construction, where we contemplate creating homes through adaptive reuse. We have taken care to approach this with a historically sensitive touch and to honor the history of individual structures in their next life as housing for veterans in need. About 2/3 of the total housing units will be located in newly constructed buildings, and about 1/3 will be located in renovated buildings. Next slide. Our community plan contemplates over 1,600 homes developed over 4 distinct phases of development. This includes 1,450 homes built by the principal developer, with 241 homes built by others. We are currently working on phase 0 of development, which will deliver 241 homes. And our team is already hard at work on pre-development activities for our phase 1 developments, which will deliver 603 additional homes. Speaking to phase 1 developments, 5 distinct phases of development have already received commitments of VASH rent vouchers to support future veteran residents. And 2 developments, buildings 402 and 404, recently received a combined $22 million in capital support from the County of Los Angeles. So we're well underway. I'll pass things on now to Steve Peck with US Vets, who can discuss our outreach and engagement efforts in more detail.
Thank you, Oscar. Next slide, please. So since we were awarded the principal development contract, we have contacted numerous entities across Los Angeles County, and all based on the draft master plan and the West LA Leasing Act. The expectations were pretty clearly laid out there, that we had to form a community, that we were serving vulnerable veterans and others. We were serving men, women, disabled families, seniors. So we have incorporated all of that into our plan. And as we have gone out to the community, we have asked them, what is it that what is your expectation of what will happen here? So we've not only gone out to all local veteran stakeholders, we've talked to the federal VA. As Max said, the chief of staff was out here. We gave her a briefing on what we were attempting to do. We've spoken to the state and actually have received $20 million from the state to support the community that we are building. We've gone to, spoken numerous times, several times a week, we speak to the VA, both OAEM and their clinical team, and SERS to determine how we can best work together. We expect to serve a number of disabled veterans in a variety of ways, and we hope that a joint service model will give us the best opportunity to give them the service that they need and deserve. We've spoken to the county on numerous occasions, the quarterly veterans homelessness policy meetings we go to on a quarterly basis. I'm going to read a little bit here. We have done so many outreach encounters that I really want to make sure that I include some of them. We've been talking to the Veteran Peer Access Network since they were formed in 2019. Community Veteran Engagement Board since 2019, LA Veterans Collaborative. We first presented there in November of 2019. Then we talked to the city, Mayor Garcetti's Military and Veterans Affairs Council on a monthly basis. So we really received a lot of input, and I want to talk a little bit about what kind of questions they have asked and what we have responded. Can we have the next slide, please? So these are some of the groups that I mentioned that we're speaking to. And in each case, we're asking them for input on what their expectation is. Some of the questions we were receiving were, will we serve severely disabled? Yes, we will. As nonprofits, we have a certain amount of case management and clinical expertise available. We will expect to work with the VA on this, both with their doctors, social workers, and use that expertise to serve the severely disabled, the chronically mentally ill. Will we serve aging veterans? Absolutely. They will be, scattered throughout the community, but also the first building that we're building, Building 207, is 59 units dedicated to senior veterans. We've always talked to VA geriatrics about this, about the potential to provide additional services. We have VASH vouchers there, but we know that we'll need additional services. We're also looking at Medicare and Medi-Cal and kind of creating a new model of joint services between the VA and a nonprofit. Will we serve female veterans? Yes, absolutely. We're doing two things there. US Vets has 20 years ago created a women's rehabilitation program at our Long Beach site, Villages of Cabrillo, which has been mentioned. We will be using that model to create a women's program at the West LA VA. We've identified a building there that allows secure access. And so we will be renovating that floor for women. But once they graduate from the rehabilitation program, they will be going out into the general community on North Campus. We'll also be serving women with children as well. They have asked if there will be a comprehensive array of services. Yes, absolutely, there will be. Aside from the case managers and the VASH case managers in each building, Building 300 will act as the social service hub. We'll have a whole variety of service providers there, US Vets, Century, all of the providers that are now providing services on the North Campus, a food campus, a legal clinic. The veteran peers will be there. We hope to have the VA up there providing the mental health counseling, case management, and employment services. US Vets has employment services at all of our sites, so we'll bring those services to Building 300. Additionally, we'll be providing homeless prevention services. We hope that we're going to be able to virtually end veterans' homelessness. This campus will have a major impact on the number of veterans who are homeless in Los Angeles. So the homeless prevention services that we now provide at our Veterans One-Stop Service Center at Patriotic Hall downtown, we'll bring all of those here, and some of those are virtual. We're reaching out to women veterans virtually. Many women veterans are suffering a lot of mental health issues. An extraordinary number are taking their own lives, and we're trying to intervene with that by reaching out to them, hopefully bringing them to campus to one-on-one counseling. We've been asked about transportation. The Metro has already been mentioned, which is an extraordinary opportunity for the veterans on campus, but we've had conversations with the Metro about first and last mile. We know that from the north side of the campus to that Metro station is quite a long way. There are going to be walking paths, there are going to be biking paths, bike rentals, or not rentals, but free bikes that can be taken from place to place. We've talked to the DAV about transporting veterans from north to south. So there's a variety of options open that will make it easier for veterans to get around campus to the South Campus where the hospital is, and to the Metro where they have access to virtually all of Los Angeles. We're in discussion with Office of Asset and Enterprise Management and the VA about locating Veterans Canteen service in a couple of the buildings. We know that we're going to want to have coffee shops, a store, a canteen, all of those things. So we're deep into those discussions now to bring those amenities to campus. As I said, the goal is to create a community, not just a bunch of housing, and we want to have all the amenities that a community would normally have. This is very much a document in process. It is a working document. We will be evaluating this periodically. We are working on the information that we have now, the demographics of the veterans that we see now in Los Angeles County. If we're really, really good at this, we're going to reduce the number of homeless veterans. So things may change in 5 years, but we'll be reevaluating this on a regular basis, taking input from the community. There may be new issues in a few years, but we've tried to incorporate all the things we've heard at these numerous meetings that we've been having over the last 2.5 years to create the kind of healing, supportive, safe environment that we know our veterans need and deserve. Who I am handing it off to Tyler, I believe.
Yep. Thank you, Steve. Next slide, please.
Can hardly hear you, Tyler.
Oh, next slide, please.
There we go.
Great, thank you. My name is Tyler Monroe. I'm Senior Vice President of Development for Thomas Safran Associates, the third member of the Principal Developer Team. I have the privilege of presenting some of the accomplishments that have been achieved to date. As part of community planning and the engagement process, the draft community plan document was published and circulated within the VA for review and comment. It's still under review currently and taking feedback both internally and externally from stakeholders. Steve already spoke to. We've done extensive community outreach to date since we were selected in late 2018, commenced in 2019. I won't touch much more on that. We put a lot of effort together with our partners at the VA into the West LA Campus Improvement Act, which was signed into law, which is a big success to help campus leads revenue stay on campus to support services and housing here locally in West Los Angeles. We've done a substantial amount of work around infrastructure and utility assessments. We're fortunate enough to start construction at the beginning of this year on the Bonsall Utility Trunk Line, which provides dry utility infrastructure, which is electrical, gas, and telecommunication services to the North Campus to support the full build out and even beyond that of 1,691 contemplated units. That work has been under construction since December of last year. We're nearing the end of our scope of work construction. That's been made possible by a generous capital contribution from the VA of $10 million to make happen. At this point in time now, the gas company and Southern California Edison are beginning to mobilize on site to actually begin to bring their infrastructure onto the campus or through our infrastructure that we've completed and bring their services on campus. As it relates to development, before I move on to development, I want to also talk on ongoing conversations around water, storm, and sewer upgrades within the campus. They continue to go through a significant amount of evaluation to figure out the best path forward. Obviously, we've implemented dry utilities infrastructure, and we're hopeful that water will happen immediately or in the very near future. Development, we broke ground on Building 207 earlier this year. Again, as Steve mentioned, it's 60 total units, of which 59 serve formerly homeless senior veterans aged 62 and over. That project is anticipated for a completion in the fall of next year. You're on campus, stop by. It's an interesting building and an interesting case study of construction and adaptive reuse of a historic building. And I already spoke to the dry utility infrastructure project that's substantially underway. In terms of social and organizational, where we've implemented a new 501c3 nonprofit backbone organization is in the process of being established. That can be spoken to a little bit later by Steve potentially, but really it's meant to be a convening organization to bring together all service and program related stakeholders on this campus that are providing those services and programs to veterans to a central location to ensure that the delivery of services is efficient as we possibly can and that we're implementing best practices, sharing ideas, and sharing resources. We've implemented a capital campaign, or we're in the process of implementing a capital campaign to begin to raise charitable contributions to do things that go above and beyond housing. As Steve mentioned, this campus must be substantially more than housing alone. There are dollars or funds out there within the state, federal, and local level to provide housing. It's a little bit more difficult to find it for those things that go above and beyond. And so we're in the process of looking for charitable contributions to be able to make some additional things above and beyond happen. We hired a director of community development, which will be a convener for community outreach, coordination of services and whatnot. And we've done significant engagement with the local veteran service provider. Steve spoke to that, so I won't go on much more on that. But a lot has been accomplished. This is a large amount of it. There's other things that obviously have been made to happen. As Oscar mentioned, on phase 1, 2 projects already have substantial commitments of funding from the County of Los Angeles. 5 projects already have commitments for PBVASH vouchers as part of phase 1. And we continue to look for additional funding. All of that happen as expeditiously as we possibly can. Next slide, please. Our next steps in the year ahead, as I mentioned, we are continuing to refine our community plan and are doing so in parallel and coordination with the work being done on the update to the draft master plan that we're here speaking about this evening. We continue with construction activities on 207, Bonsall Trunk Line. We are working on pre-development and due diligence activities as it relates to phase one projects, specifically identifying needs in order to turn those parcels over to the principal developer and mobilize for construction. There's a lot of work that's happening there in collaboration with the teams within the VA. That's been going really well. Continue to work on infrastructure. Obviously, we're turning our attention to wet utilities now, specifically water. Momentum is building there, and that's really wonderful to see. A lot of work there has been done with VA and the county. That collaboration has been really, really terrific. And we continue on advocacy and fundraising efforts. And as I mentioned, we're continuing the creation of this backbone organization to really be a convener for stakeholders on campus that are providing services and programs to veterans currently and in the future. So with that, next slide, please, will be for Mr. Steve Peck to talk about our therapeutic community approach.
Thank you, Tyler. We create at all of the U.S. vet sites, we create a therapeutic community. Some of our sites are large, 600 veterans plus, including Villages of Cabrera, which we operate with Century Housing. And in order to create a safe and a rehabilitation environment, you really need to engage the veterans in their own rehabilitation. So we have town halls on a regular basis. We form councils within each building so that the veterans are speaking among themselves, identifying issues that they feel need work on, and then they bring those to us. So we are always being responsive to the needs of the veterans, as told to us by the veterans themselves. They know better what they need than we do. We have the case managers are all engaged in this. We have peers involved in this. We have veteran service coordinators, so that we really want to create an environment where the veterans are very much a part of the community. This and having them contribute in this way also increases their own chances at rehabilitation. And some of them are staying for months, some of them are staying for years, some of them will stay with us till the end of their life. And all those choices are valuable. We want to serve those veterans who need these services. Next, I think it's back to Tyler.
Thank you, Steve. So to wrap up, how can you help? Here are a few areas. Number one, we have a ongoing survey at surveymonkey.com. The link is shown on the slide that we're taking input on a variety of things. Check that out. We'd love to have your input. Please communicate the story of progress and transformation. Obviously, a lot needs to happen to advance this ambitious objective and goal, but a lot is happening and has happened in the last few years, and it will continue to happen. Please share with us any inspiring stories, photographs, or artifacts related to your experience with the West LA VA. It's important for the story of the campus, important for our narrative, and important for what we're trying to accomplish as part of the community plan. And then we would encourage you to volunteer your time in support of veterans, obviously at the West LA VA campus now more. Next slide, please. Thank you. Thank you for having us. Thank you for giving us the opportunity to present where we are and where we've been. We look forward to happy to take questions. I think we're happy, or maybe we're going to somebody else now.
Are we good? Okay. Just a few slides here and then we'll take questions. This is a path where we're at. We're at master plan town hall engagement number 2 today. We do have an engagement with the VCOEB and looking forward to that. We'll have master plan town hall engagement number 3. That's tentatively scheduled for the end of September here on the 30th. And then we're projecting the Federal Registry 30-day posting of a working draft of master plan 2022-2027, tentatively in that first 2 weeks of October. We're working to get it out as fast as we can, and that'll allow us to get feedback, to synthesize that with the feedback we're receiving along the way, and then get the product moved to higher headquarters later in November and early December. Master Plan Town Hall Engagement number 4, scheduled in October. We really don't have a date yet. We want to see how we progress and what new information we have to share for input. And then Master Plan 2022-2027 final draft. You can see that in early December, moving forward to VA leadership. Next slide. We are frozen. Okay, so these last 2 slides are somewhat similar, although this first one talks about our website, westladraftmasterplan.org, and there's a special area there. You can see the tab, Master Plan 2022-2027. If you go to the bottom there, and that's what I want to focus on first, is where to give feedback. The questionnaire is there. You can choose the area you want to provide feedback. You can also enter a limited number of words for text, but you can also attach documents, so you're not really limited in the amount of input you can provide. And then you can submit the questionnaire. There are step-by-step instructions on the page. That's that smaller text that'll walk you through it. So go to that tab. There's also a tab there to the left that's called Library. We have some useful information and historical data and documents in there. Go to the next slide. This will be our last content slide. On that same page, those other areas that are highlighted, the last one we focused on the questionnaire at the bottom, but now just looking at those other areas we've blown up, the Master Plan 2022-2027 informational concept paper is a good document. It provides a lot of the background, where we're at, and some of the way forward context or discussion. The draft community plan that the PD just talked to us about, their plan is there. It's detailed, it's lengthy. There's a lot of good information and data in there. And then town hall presented materials, things that we present will be posted in that tab. You can go in there and see those materials. We'll have those separate graphics from Johnson Fain about each of the areas and the sites that they presented for constraints and opportunities. We'll have those graphics there where you can download them and view them in greater detail. Next slide. Okay, that takes us to questions. I appreciate it, and we'll stand by.
Hello, Hamilton Underwood here. I have a question.
Okay.
So I liked one that developers touched upon, the fact that building a bunch of housing units doesn't necessarily spell a community. So I like the idea there's a canteen or maybe 2 are going to be put within the housing. Is there anything else to make it a community, which is a very tricky thing to pull off?
I can certainly talk about the aspects of the community that I've seen in the plan and the draft community plan by the principal developer. There's a great graphic way in there, maybe a couple hundred pages deep, but they've really thought through some of the services and some of the like coffee shops and food stores and other things that need to be there for a community. And of course, we want to talk about what people are doing in their community. So there's some job training, and there'll be some other things that I think the Cabrillo Village does with its community residents through community center type activity that really helps them stay engaged. And then transportation is key to connect this community to the communities around it, whether it be Brentwood or Westwood, or even the South Campus, where we'll have the medical center and other things going on. And hopefully when COVID is a little less pervasive, then we'll have some group sessions and group things that folks can come to, and some other activities. I'll let the principal developer address that if they want to talk about their concepts of community in a little more detail.
Yes, thank you, Mac. I'll add to that. There is a town center, a town green that faces Building 13, which we're calling our town hall. That has a large meeting space in it, and we can conduct job fairs in there. We'll have holiday events, Veterans Day events, speeches, maybe show movies in there. So at each of our sites, we have an activities coordinator, really getting veterans out of their units and into social interaction with other veterans. I already mentioned the resident councils that we have, but the activities coordinator will arrange trips. We arrange fishing trips. We have book clubs. We also have a number of therapeutic groups. So there's a PTSD groups. There are obviously AA, NA groups. There are a number of educational opportunities. All of those things bring people together. But that kind of town hall, town square, we envision a patio outside the canteen where veterans can congregate. At our Long Beach site, we have chess and checkerboards out there. So the whole campus will be built to bring veterans out and into social interaction with other veterans.
Thank you. What you described in the beginning was kind of a facility. A facility is not a community, right?
You're
And
exactly right.
And people want to be a place where they can go adjust their chair 1 inch to the right or left and have something to eat or drink and watch other people. That's how it usually seems to work. And I'm glad that there will be a patio because it's exactly what's needed. And I would encourage a water element of some sort. It always seems to do the trick. Thank you.
And there'll be a number of other spaces, more private meditation spaces. We didn't mention the Wadsworth Chapel. That will be renovated, and a moral injury program will be run in there by Volunteers of America. It will also be a worship and meditation space. We're talking about building a labyrinth there for meditation. So we're trying to incorporate these elements throughout the campus, whether if they want to be with a lot of people or just a private place to talk to someone else, we can accommodate that.
Sounds excellent. I'm glad to see that building getting its makeover before it's too late.
Absolutely.
Thank you. Any other questions?
Hi there, it's Josh Bamberger. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, thank you for your excellent presentations. As you know, the needs of veterans in terms of their medical needs, the type of housing that they need varies based on their medical concerns. And the VA has typically used housing as sort of one size fits all without trying to create housing that specifically meets the needs of people for their psychiatric and medical concerns. One place where that is a problem is veterans who are very capable of getting back into the workforce. And for homeless veterans who get HUD-VASH and then are able to generate income, they have to make a decision as to whether they retain their income or lose their housing. Because as they get more money, they lose their HUD-VASH voucher. So question one, and I have three questions, so I'll just put them all out there first. Question one is, what are you doing in terms of your master plan to create the type of housing where people can generate income and then use that as a springboard for independent housing outside of the HUD-VASH system? So that's for people who are, going to be getting back in the workforce. That's question one. Question two is the other end of the extreme. So for veterans who are able to live independently in permanent supportive housing, that's great. And then for veterans who need a nursing home, that's great because the VA has the CLC. But there are lots of people, particularly in the aging veteran community, that need more services than are typically available in permanent supportive housing, but don't have a skilled nursing need. Is there any plan within the master plan to develop housing specifically for people who need what's typically in a residential care facility? And if so, what are you doing to bring in the partners to be able to provide that care within the limitations of what the VA can provide? And then the third question is, what has been presented to the veterans community and the general population about the needs, the medical and psychiatric needs of the homeless veteran population in Los Angeles? as a member of the VOCOAB, I have yet to see a comprehensive assessment of what the housing needs are based on people's medical, psychiatric, and substance use disorders and conditions. So if you're going to create housing, the housing should meet the need. But if you haven't done an assessment to present what that need is, how can you be moving ahead with developing this housing? So those are 3 questions I'd love to hear you answer. Thank you.
So,
Should I go ahead, or you want to go back?
no, go ahead, and then I'll add a couple things at the end.
Great. Thank you, Josh. You always ask good questions. For the first question on the VASH vouchers, yes, some veterans do increase their income to the point where they are no longer eligible for a VASH voucher. To us, that's a good thing. If veterans can go back to work, more power to. We want them to really be active and a contributing member of the community. So we hope through the multiple services they are being provided while they're on campus, they are gaining all the skills that they need to be successful out in the community. At some of our sites, our Village of Cabrillo site in particular, we do have over-income housing. We've not gotten that far here to designate any of these buildings for over-income, but it's a good point, and we should probably consider that. It is more difficult to fund that, of course, without the VASH vouchers, but it's something that we'll put in there. The one in regards to your second question, one advantage this campus offers is that we can create an entire continuum of care. So there is the domiciliary, there's New Directions, there is the bridge homes. All of those are for vets coming right off the street. Those veterans, once they receive services and are stable, can move into the permanent housing on campus and continue to benefit from all of the social services that are provided on the campus. Once they begin aging, as I mentioned, Building 207, the first building that we're building, is for senior veterans. We are working now on developing the capacity to provide the services that senior veterans need, that US Vets today has very little of. But we're also working with VA Geriatrics to see if they can assist. But we'll develop a system where we can have home health aides, for instance, where we're going to have visiting nurses, all those things that will keep them in their housing until such time as they need nursing care. And the next step would be either the nursing home or the Calvet home, which is right on campus. So we can really provide services to them from the time they walk in until end of life. That's the plan there. We've spoken in regards to your third question. We've spoken to VA staff. I've spoken to VA clinical staff, psychiatric staff about the challenges that will face us as chronically mentally ill veterans come in. We intend to create a diverse community. In other words, we're not going to create a building for the chronically mentally ill. It's not a psych board that we're creating. We're trying to create a community, and we have found that by incorporating veterans who are higher acuity with veterans who are higher functioning, they tend to rise to the occasion. But there still be those services, medical and psychiatric, will both be available to them readily, both there on campus in Building 300 and at the hospital. So that's how we intend to handle that. But as I said, this is a plan in progress, and we will continue to learn and grow with this and design buildings and services accordingly.
Thanks, Steve. And I'm glad. It's wonderful to have a plan in progress. I guess my point is, once the buildings are starting to be planned, if you don't have the data to generate that, then you're putting the cart before the horse. So I have significant concerns that there hasn't been adequate assessment, and then thinking through some of these challenging policy issues, specifically the issue around too sick for permanent supportive housing, but not sick enough for nursing home, is an issue that I really would love to see the VA writ large attend, and specifically in this facility building a building that serves those people again, I want to see that in the master plan. And I'm concerned that the master plan is being developed without taking those concerns into consideration. Thank you.
We're regularly having conversations with LASA about the point in time counts to see who's out there and what their needs are. We have regular meetings now with SERVs on campus to talk about the variety of services that we might provide together. So we'll continue to look at the demographics of the population and design housing accordingly. Good point.
So, Dr. Bamberger, this is Steve Braverman. Just wanted to jump in with one additional piece. I appreciate the question because we've also identified that gap that you described, those veterans who may be more appropriate for assisted living environments than either a skilled nursing home or permanent supportive housing. So to that end, we've been working nationally, when I say nationally, within VHA nationally, with the Office of Geriatrics. And in combination between the Homeless Program Office and the Office of Geriatrics, there's actually a pilot program in which we're going to be engaged to utilize HUD-VASH vouchers in the community for veterans who would fit that assisted living paradigm and be able to go into those kind of boarding locations instead of the skilled nursing home facilities and utilizing HUD-VASH for that purpose. So more to follow on that, but that's something that we're in the process of addressing at the moment. That doesn't speak to your question about whether a similar kind of building with similar kind of operations could be built here as part of the master plan. We'll take a look at that, but that's something that we're doing in the community to address your comment about VA as a whole. That's a goal down the road. Over.
That's super exciting. Thank you. And I'd love to see that as part of a master plan that takes this kind of input into consideration before it is concretized in front of the secretary's desk.
Thank you. That's the kind of feedback we need that really prods us in some areas that we are thinking about, but some expert input is what we really want to drive towards and include that in the concept that we release in early October for comment. We have about a minute and a half. Is there anyone else that has a quick question or something they'd want to state? Okay, that being said, we'll wrap up here. I appreciate appreciate the input and your time and attendance here. Just want to remind everyone the West LA Draft Master Plan website that we've been using for several years is available for input, and we'll look for that there and we'll start to incorporate that as soon as we see it. Okay, thanks much, everyone.